Welcome to a very sunny afternoon in Southern California. We've got a great spot here to have a look at what's happening on the northern complex at Los Angeles International. This aeroplane, a China Eastern 330, is on short final for runway 24 right. Now, all things being considered, this 330 is known as a butter jet, so I'm anticipating an absolute perler of a landing, and there we are, we got it. They're just tantalising those Dunlops onto the surface. Great stuff. Oh, and this livery, by the way, is Greenland Group, even though they've got blue paint in it. Well, if you can explain that, you're a better person than me. But it's all under control and slowing up beautifully. Let's turn our attention back out east again, and on the approach is a Cathay A350K. It's inbound from their hub in Hong Kong. These are majestic looking jets, there's no doubt about it, particularly their winglets are really cool, and a lovely job done by the aerodynamicists in Toulouse. The autopilot's now been disengaged. You get a little bit more of a waggle as the human input comes in rather than the computers. And look at those massive engines just bringing that in gracefully to touchdown with barely a hint of rubber smoke coming off the runway. The nose wheel is down, and then up come the ground spoilers and thrust reverse idle. There'll be brake to vacate action going on now, and that will have them going off the runway about 2/3 the way down, and then they'll stop before they cross the next one, 24 left, because that is used for takeoffs at LA. Next on the approach is one that's really pretty easy to recognise. If you've been listening to me in the past, I always say about the big barn doors in between the engines and the fuselage. A 777 I refer to, of course. And this one is also easy to recognise the carrier by that blue top on the fuselage. It is, of course, Korean. Some people call it the Pepsi airline because of the design on the vertical stabiliser. A wee bit of rock and roll there, and landing a bit short, I would say, compared to the other people, but thrust reverse idle, and the speed brakes are up, and she's slowing down. It's a mighty big aeroplane, and you need to be very careful that on the touchdown you don't over-rotate in pitch, albeit there should be pitch limit indications and warnings. It's almost like a daisy chain of aeroplanes coming across the Pacific, because here's another one from the Orient. China Airlines inbound from Taipei with an A350, but this time it's a 900. From a distance it looks exactly the same as that Cathay jet was, and they are extremely cool looking machines. Look at the massive engines. They're probably getting on for the size of a 737 fuselage, and this one is from China Airlines, and it certainly hasn't got the standard livery on it. We'll look at that in a second, but it's very stable as it's coming in, and again landing a little bit short compared to the previous aeroplanes apart from the Korean. In case you didn't know what the aircraft was, there's a big clue halfway down the fuselage, and then a bit of light and dark blue weave on the back end before you get to the usual flower, just to complete the picture. Brake to vacate action with these boys as well, as they will turn off to the left in due course. Next up for a wee change is a bit of low cost action from a Southwest 737. It's an 800 series and it's coming in from Phoenix. Very short sector, less than an hour. And the utilisation by Southwest of the aircraft fleet is just unbelievable. So God knows how many sectors this particular aircraft has done today. Putting its right main gear down momentarily before the left is like stepping down gently off a step ladder, and it'll be slowing up and clearing that runway before you can say Boeing 737. Now, should any of you been experiencing withdrawal symptoms from not seeing a Far Eastern airline, then here's one coming now. It's an All Nippon Airways 777-300 inbound from Tokyo Haneda. The autopilot's just come out now, and the pilot flying is just putting in their gentle inputs, a little bit of sway and roll, but not much. Look at the tilts on the main leg bogies, and they're going to touch down absolutely as smooth as Asian silk, and a derotation on the nose. Look at the length of that airplane. They're bloody enormous things. Now, the takeoff lobby have been screaming, so in answer to their demands, here's a 747-8, a really cool machine, and it belongs to Lufthansa. It's on its way back to Frankfurt and has commenced its roll down 24 left on this northern complex at LA. How do we know it's a Dash 8 and not a 400? Well, if you look at the wingtips, you see that the winglets that you would traditionally see on a 400 are absent. It's that blended tip. You have the pulsing strobe, and you also, if you look very carefully, have the serrated edge on the back end of the engine nacelle by the exhaust nozzle. There's a fair bit of flap there. I think the aeroplane's pretty heavy, and so in terms of passenger freight and therefore a load of fuel. So let's just try and make a marker as to where it's rotated, probably by that bush and road sign, that if we get any other takeoffs we can compare and contrast. That's a gorgeous sight, always, always, always. Never is a 747 taking off not a fine sight to see, and beautiful jet. And here, rapidly following it down 24 left, is Air France 65 Heavy. It's a 777-300 bound for Paris Charles de Gaulle. Two things I notice here. First of all, the air accelerating into the front of the engine. The water vapour is condensing, so you're getting that mist in the intake. And then also, very, very noticeably, it's sitting high on the oleos. Suggests to me that it's not particularly heavy. In fact, it might have a very, very light load. Let's look to see exactly where it rotates and then unsticks from the runway compared to where that Lufthansa Jumbo goes. And we can already see it's rotating, and it has unstuck from the runway and is airborne well ahead of that road sign and bush that we used as the marker for the Lufthansa jet. Time to return to the landing runway on the Northern Complex, which is 24 right traditionally at LA. And this time it's an Air China 777-300. This one's inbound from Beijing, and it's only a few minutes short of 12 hours that the punters have been in this metal tube. So they'll be looking forward to getting on the ground. It's all looking very stable. The autopilot's been disengaged, and pilot flying now just lets it continue on the way down. And then as they approach into the flare, just ease up the nose a wee bit, hold the attitude, and those wheels will land themselves onto the runway. And very much same way, same day as the other airplane showed us how to do it. It's not a day for having any excuses for f***ing it up, because the conditions are just about perfect, really. Up next on this unofficial American landing competition at LA's Northern Complex is an Alaskan Airlines A320. Formerly operated by Virgin America, it was brought into the Alaskan fleet whenever the two companies merged. With a little bit of right wing down from pilot flying, it's going to touch down first on that right main leg gear. All the other aircraft have been doing the same, I know not why. Clamshell doors on the reversers and the speed brakes are up, so she's slowing down. But the one thing you got to say about Alaska is, regardless of the weather, fair or foul, disruption or whatever, that fella on the back always has a smile on his face. You know what they say about Airbuses? They're either none or you get two. Well, here's a second one. It's a 320 belonging to Air Canada, inbound from Vancouver. So it's come over from the other side of the border. I don't care too much for the colour, but the landing I like very much. The new livery I think is absolutely superb, and it's a proper job. It covers the whole aeroplane, and I particularly like the mascara anti-glare line round the flight deck. Next up on the what appears to be short haul hour here in the Northern Complex is a SkyWest on behalf of Alaskan Airlines E-Jet, hopefully not flown by E-Jets. It's a 175. Look at the wing tips. They are enhanced wing tips, not split scimitar or sharklets, but unique to Embraer. And after a brief float, we touched down first with the right main gear like everybody else. Aerodynamic braking going on here, bleeding off the speed with the increased angle of attack of the wing rather than thrust reverse and auto brake, which seems to be quite prevalent amongst Embraer operators. And finally, have a look at those square windows. They're different too. Time we had a Boeing, and here's one coming now. It's a 777, but you knew that because of the recce features that I keep telling you about. 12 hours and 6 minutes from Taipei. The airline's easy to recognise because you got that big green splurge on the tail. Lovely touchdown. But what in the name of God has happened to the side of the aeroplane? It's almost as if it was parked outside a building that had the painters in, and it's got some splattering. Or maybe, given that there's some pictures on the back, was actually done more responsibly, but not my cup of tea. Okay, so what's happening next? I'm going to take a Jeff Duke, and there we see an Airbus 330, if I'm not mistaken, and you would think it's maybe Delta, looking at the colours on the tail and it all being very plain otherwise, but it's actually not. It's Hawaiian, and this should be a buttery landing. Look at the Dunlops dangling over the landing surface with the back end of the bogie just about to touch down now. That's absolutely as sweet as honey, isn't it? Super. Now, say whatever you like about all these modern jets, their efficiency, they don't burn much fuel, they're made of plastic and all that sort of good stuff. That's absolutely fine, but they all look the same to me. But this one doesn't. This is a classic, a modern classic, probably one of the best airplanes that Boeing ever built. It's the 757. Look at the lines of it. Its proportions are perfect, just like that landing. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a sports car as well. It had oodles of power, and it was great for short, medium, long haul. It served all manner of carriers across the world so well. that will be sorely missed the day they finally stop flying, I tell you. Absolutely stonking machine. So continuing on with Boeing's and Delta, here's an 800 Series 737 of theirs that is all set up. This is coming into 24 right, and pilot flying's just kicked out the autopilot, and with the merest variation in pitch, barely perceptible, they're going to come in and hopefully show us a perfect landing. But like everybody else before them, they've put the right main leg gear down first. I know not why. Those winglets are absolutely enormous, aren't they? They're almost disproportionate to the size of the wings. Now let's swing our eyes round to the left and see if we've got a Boeing, and we have. It's a 767 that's bloody near 3 decades old. Look at the right hand engine, and the stroboscopic effect is changing the direction and the speed of that spinner, at least to the human eye. Also note the main landing gear bogies are pointing down, which was unique to the 76, and those huge winglets. And as the weight comes off the wings and is transferred onto the undercarriage, the wingtips will bend down. A great old grand dam if ever there was. A bit like your great aunt. Oh, these conditions really couldn't be beaten, and if pilot flying had any wit at all, they would have kicked the autopilot out a few miles up the approach to keep their hand in at the manual flying. You don't get a chance at doing that very often these days. Here we come into the flare, bit of a float, but let's see if they put the right wheel down. You see, the right wheel's gone down first there, like the preceding aircraft. There's nothing to write home about there. Everybody should be very happy, and that brings to an end our coverage from the Northern Complex at LA. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you the next time. Until then, bye for now.